"If you so much as touch that Barrett, you're finished out of the team forever." Those had been Commander Hayden Greaves's words. Yet in Salton Valley, when the lead sniper dropped, when every route was choked by enemy fire, Ashley Marin, the medic no one believed in, stepped forward. Her palm pressed against the rifle's stock. One breath, one trigger pull, and the battlefield froze as the sky itself seemed to fall silent, forced to witness a truth no one had ever dared to dream. Unless she dared to touch the Barrett, she would be cast out of the team forever. That was the one reminder the SEAL commander had left her with. No raised voice, no barked command. Just a quiet sentence, delivered so casually it could have been about spilled coffee, not a weapon that could punch through an armored truck from 300 meters away. But the weight of his words was undeniable. A boundary had been drawn. Cross it, and everything, her place, her future, her identity would vanish. The Barrett .50 calorie rested in the corner like a predator coiled for sleep. Wrapped in rough canvas, half hidden between 3 battered supply crates at the rim of Bakersfield Valley, it seemed almost alive, waiting. The morning heat pressed down heavy, turning every sound, boots on gravel, rotors in the distance, into echoes. It was as if the desert itself was listening, daring her to move closer. Ashley Marin, the medic fresh from 29 Palms, crossed the open ground with the light tread of someone who didn't quite belong yet. A faint scar on her wrist flashed under the sun when her sleeve slipped back, the only visible trace of battles fought in silence. Her boots were dusty but tied with precision, her gait modest, unremarkable. But when her eyes found the Barrett, there was no mistaking what burned there. Recognition, a dangerous kind of knowing. Around her, the camp moved in its restless rhythm. Helicopters groaned in the air, radios hissed, a handful of soldiers laughed too loud. In that noise, a medic standing near a weapon meant nothing, until her fingers brushed against the rifle's cold frame. And then, the whole world seemed to stall. She didn't grab the trigger, didn't rush. Her palm just lingered, as though she were touching an old memory that hurt to remember. And sure enough, it came back, the voice of her father, steady and tired. "Some things aren't meant for you, not until the world runs out of those sane enough to carry them." Her glove slipped off. Skin to steel, she pressed her hand to the rifle as gently as a prayer. The weapon did not resist, did not threaten. It simply lay there, silent, as though it had been waiting for her all along. 90 seconds. That was all. But in those seconds, Ashley stepped beyond the line she had always obeyed. For 4 years she had stitched wounds, stopped bleeding, tried to hold life together in the ruins of war. For 4 years she had refused to believe she could end life instead. Yet here she was, staring at the truth. Perhaps she could. Perhaps she must. Then the valley erupted. A plume of smoke surged upward, thick and black, from the far ridge. The first explosion shook the ground. No warning, no order, only instinct. Soldiers rushed to the choke point, gunners stumbling back toward secondary cover, recon screens blinking useless static. The commander hadn't yet spoken when the convoy's lead vehicle was torn apart by fire. Ashley crouched beside the Barrett. No one looked her way. No one spoke her name. She did not wait for permission. Between chaos and clarity, between fear and inevitability, she pulled the bolt back. The first round found its target. A shockwave of silence followed. The second shot shattered the hillside into stillness. The Barrett roared, drowning out the panic, cutting through the noise of war like thunder at midnight. Above, the helicopter banked in wide circles, its pilot shouting into comms, desperate, "Who the hell just fired?" There was no reply. Only a young woman with brown hair whipping in the dry wind, kneeling beside a rifle she was never meant to touch. Her face carried no triumph, no fear, only the quiet question of whether she had broken the rules, or if she had been the last one left to honor them. And then, without hesitation, she pulled the trigger a third time. Some people step into the military to prove they are tougher, braver, or stronger than the world believes. Ashley wasn't one of them. She never set out to prove anything. She simply wanted to belong, to serve, to do something decent, to matter. That was the truth people saw on the surface, the reason they assumed she would never climb very far. She had come from almost nothing. Ashley grew up on the edge of a sun-baked neighborhood outside the Marine Corps base at 29 Palms, California. The house she called home had no air conditioning. Summers burned like fire against the walls, yet there was always cold water in the kitchen, thanks to the battered old freezer her father refused to let die. Her mother worked quiet shifts at a library, hands smelling of paper and dust. Her father, a man who once served with Delta Force, spoke little of war, but his silence said enough. Ashley had watched him break down a chicken with a combat knife in seconds, faster than chefs with polished blades, his eyes always somewhere far away. And then, he was gone. An explosion during what was meant to be a routine training exercise took him from her life. The shock didn't break Ashley with rage. Instead, it hollowed her into silence. She grew stiller, more watchful. Once, she had dreamed of combat, of following his shadow. But after his death, she turned toward medicine, against what everyone insisted she was made for. "Those eyes," one sergeant said, "they're a sniper's eyes." But Ashley refused. She chose not to kill, she chose to heal. Yet in the tight world of special operations, the healer is rarely respected. On her team, Ashley was the little sister. People liked her enough, in the way you like a stray cat that doesn't scratch, but when she spoke, her voice slid past them like wind. When she recommended new medical kits better suited for the desert's heat, the commander brushed her off. Later, when she asked to spend time with the rifle squad just to understand their tactics, the men laughed. "You're a nurse, not Rambo." At training camp, jokes about her floated easily. Once, someone quipped that if Ashley ever held a Barrett, she'd probably disinfect it. A joke, a punchline, nothing more. Cute, harmless. Ashley didn't laugh. She just lowered her head and wrote another line in her notebook. Because what no one saw was what came after. After shifts ended, when the others drowned in beer or sleep, she stayed awake. Alone, she drilled herself. She tore down and rebuilt medical kits with the same care a sniper gives to his rifle. She mapped the distance from her bunk to the window, measuring angles as though her room were a firing range. Every quiet hour was an act of preparation, not for glory, not for recognition, but for a day she suspected might come, the day no one else could. Once, during a tactical simulation, Ashley spotted a flaw in their supply route. She quietly reworked the plan, shifting the path so it avoided what would have been a kill zone. The drill ended, the team survived, and the commander moved on without realizing why. No one asked who had saved them. No one knew it was her. And Ashley never said a word. She wasn't there to collect credit or prove superiority. She was there to watch, to learn, to wait. Because sometimes the quietest soldier is not the weakest link. Sometimes the one everyone underestimates is the only one preparing for the moment that truly matters. Every soldier keeps something they don't want the world to touch. For Ashley, it was a plain wooden box, small enough to vanish beneath her bunk in the training camp, yet heavy with the weight of memory. Its corners were rounded smooth by time, its surface scarred with scratches no one bothered to notice. No lock, no nameplate. To anyone else, it was nothing more than forgotten junk. But inside it lived a world Ashley could never leave behind, a world she carried like a hidden pulse. Within the box lay 3 objects. A thick notebook, its pages crowded with cramped handwriting equations on ballistics, notes about desert winds, angles, and elevation. A sniper's glove, worn to threads, the index finger torn from years of use, and a faded black and white photograph, edges curled, colors leached away by the Sunday. In it, a man sat beneath an oak tree, cleaning an M24 rifle with the calm patience of ritual. Her father, James Merrin. Among Delta Force circles, his name carried weight. But for Ashley, he was never a legend in uniform. He was the man who taught her how to glide across sand without leaving footprints. The one who lined tin cans on fence posts and made her squint with one eye half closed until she could hit them from 50 yards. The one who spun fairy tales in the quiet dusk while his hands dismantled a rifle as easily as peeling an ear of corn. The summer she turned 12, he led her to a training range not to fire but to listen. He told her to sit still in the heat, to hear the rhythm of her own heart, to feel silence as if it were a second skin. "Reload your mind like you'd reload a magazine," he whispered. "No one shoots better than the person who isn't afraid of silence." He never pushed her toward soldiering, but neither did he shield her from the truth. "You've got the eyes," he said once, with a gravity that silenced her. "The eyes of someone who knows when it's time to end something before it spreads. Don't let anyone teach you to kneel before what should be stopped." Then came the call. A training accident, they said. An explosion. Quick. Brutal. By the time the words reached her, her father was already a folded flag on a bed, already another name on a plaque. Her mother, stern, weary, resolute, watched Ashley clutch the old glove like it was an anchor. "Promise me," she said, voice trembling but firm. "Don't follow one death with another gun." Ashley nodded, and for years, she believed the promise had held. She turned to medicine, not as surrender but as escape. If she could not erase the violence, she would heal what it left behind. In the wards, with bandages and morphine, she sought to stitch her own wounds closed while saving others. Yet sometimes, when gunfire cracked in the distance or rust scented the night air, the scar inside her throbbed, raw and restless. And so, in the quiet hours when the camp slept, Ashley stayed awake. She leafed through her notebook, scribbling formulas on wind drag, bullet drop, desert mirages. Not because she meant to use them, but because forgetting felt impossible. One night, sorting through the medical storehouse, she found a discarded scope, dust-coated and cracked. She carried it back, polished it clean, and set it on her windowsill. To anyone else, it was a curiosity. To Ashley, it was ritual. Each dawn, she adjusted its focus, not hunting targets, but searching for the version of herself that still lingered beyond the horizon. Once, a young soldier glimpsed the photo tucked inside her notes. "Who's that?" he asked, nodding toward the man beneath the tree. Ashley's lips curved into a quiet smile. "Just someone who taught me how to look a little farther." What no one realized was how far those eyes could truly see. When the mission to escort the supply convoy across the blood-red earth of Salton Valley began, no one imagined it would become the day every rule was shattered. On paper, it was nothing more than a supply run, a line drawn on a map. But the jagged terrain, the broken comms, and the merciless California desert sun turned what should have been routine into a carefully laid snare. 90 seconds before the first explosion, the recon UAV went dark. No warning, no explanation, just silence. Then the blast tore through the canyon, followed by gunfire cascading like rain against steel. A blind curve, a quiet gorge, and suddenly the convoy was caught in a storm no one saw coming. The SEAL formation splintered under the first wave. Snipers, the eyes and reach of the unit were either down, pinned, or cut off. The one weapon capable of shifting the balance, the Barrett 50 calorie, lay abandoned near the cliffside, not far from where the UAV had vanished. Ownerless, silent, waiting. At the forward medical station, Ashley Merrin fought through chaos. The tent was a furnace of screams and blood. One soldier clutched a torn neck, choking on his own breath. Another bled out from jagged shrapnel embedded deep. Her hands worked fast, her mind split between tourniquets and bandages, while her earpiece spat broken static. Between the cracks of white noise came a desperate voice. "We can't see the shooters! They're along the ridge! God, they're moving!" Ashley's eyes snapped to the terrain monitor. then to the open west. A narrow pass. The perfect vantage point. She didn't need to be told it was the place any sniper would claim. A place where, if someone acted quickly, the ambush could be broken. And then her father's words came back. Words buried deep in memory, surfacing in the heat of disaster. A person who runs from chaos is a victim. A person who steps into chaos to end it, that's a warrior. She rose. No one called after her. No one tried to stop her. The tent was too full of panic to notice the young nurse tying her boots tighter, wiping blood and sweat from her face, and stepping into the open valley. She didn't sling a rifle across her shoulder. She carried the medical bag, as always. But tucked in its pocket this time were two things that had never left her. An old sniper's glove with a torn finger, and a battered scope she'd cleaned countless nights when the base was asleep. Small tokens. But they felt like armor. The ground fought her with every step. Sand scorched her palms as she crawled. Rock sliced her knees like the valley itself was testing whether she deserved to climb. The sun blurred everything into a mirage, warping her vision like glass out of focus. Still, she pushed forward until her eyes caught the glint of metal in the dust. The Barrett. It lay forgotten among empty casings, silent and heavy, but not lifeless. Ashley slid the glove over her hand. It was an intimate act, like tying herself back to a thread cut years ago. She knelt beside the rifle, setting the scope on a makeshift stand someone had left behind. Her hands moved without hesitation, each adjustment as precise as though she'd been doing it every day. Through the lens, the valley sharpened. Distance, 823 meters. Wind drift, 3 degrees left. Elevation adjusted. Her breathing slowed, controlled, steady. And then shadows moved. 3 armed figures creeping along the ridge, preparing to rain grenades down on the trapped convoy. Ashley's finger rested on the trigger. Her body stilled, her heart aligned with the silence. No tremor, no rush. The first round cracked through the air. A clean, sharp sound. Nothing cinematic, nothing exaggerated. Just the pure truth of steel and intent. And in that single breath between recoil and silence, the image of Ashley Marin, the medic, the underestimated little sister, was forever broken. She was no longer just the healer. She was the line between survival and collapse. And it was only the beginning. Dear audience, take a sip of water, breathe for a moment, and stay with this story. The twists you haven't heard yet are still waiting ahead. And I'd love to hear from you. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. If this story has gripped you so far, drop a 1 below so we know you're with us and so we can keep bringing you more tales that keep your heart racing. She lay prone behind the Barrett 50 caliber, as if the rifle had been waiting for her all along, as if life had only loaned her to medicine before calling her back. Through the scope, the world narrowed to a tunnel. The chaos around her, the screams, the ricochets, the cries of the wounded faded into silence. All that remained was her breath, steady and unbroken. For the first time in years, Ashley's hands were rock still. No tremor, no hesitation, no glance over her shoulder for approval. The crack of the first shot tore across the canyon like thunder. The enemy with the RPG crumpled, ripped from his perch. Her earpiece buzzed with disbelief. Who just fired? It was Vance, the spotter, watching the feed from the drone. He leaned forward in his chair, eyes wide. The figure he saw behind the Barrett, face streaked with dust and blood, was not the sniper he expected. It was Ashley. His voice dropped, almost a whisper carried by static. Who gave you permission to shoot? He already knew the answer. Ashley didn't waste words. She realigned her sights, exhaled, and pulled the trigger again. A second shot. A second kill. Wind drift? Accounted for. Distance? Calculated. The only equation that mattered now was life against death, and the same hands that once read a pulse through fragile veins were now measuring the rhythm of an enemy's final breath. Below, the SEAL team surged. Her precision carved open a path through the choke point. A Humvee broke free of a deadly crossfire when she neutralized the machine gunner, pinning it down. Each bullet bent the battle back into their favor. In 8 relentless minutes, she fired 5 rounds. 4 struck home, 1 obliterated an enemy sensor, all while the medic's armband clung to her sleeve like an unshakable truth. She had not stopped being who she was. Between volleys, she heard a groan. Without hesitation, Ashley slid down the slope. She pressed bandages to a bleeding wound, set fluids, rigged a makeshift shield against shrapnel. And then, like wind through reeds, she climbed back, cradled the Barrett, and fired again. The same hand that steadied a needle was the hand that squeezed the trigger. Neither one stopped saving lives. A veteran sniper later admitted, "I thought people like her had no place on the front line. That day, I saw how wrong I was." From the command center, Greaves watched every move on the monitor. He gave no order to stop her. How could he? To silence her meant climbing that hill himself, and he knew deep down he couldn't do what she was doing. Ashley didn't rely only on her eyes. She drew from instinct, from medicine, from battlefield intuition. Every shot was less about killing and more about protecting. She wasn't fighting to win. She was fighting so others could live. By the time the sun dipped low, the battle was over. The smoke clung to the air, but the convoy stood intact. Against all odds, there were no further losses. A commander's voice broke the silence. "I've never seen anything like that, a nurse saving lives with both hands. One to heal, one to fight." When Vance finally scaled the hill, he found her seated quietly, shoulders relaxed, cheek resting gently against the Barrett as if she were leaning against an old friend. Her eyes weren't heavy with exhaustion, but calm, almost serene. He sat down beside her, glancing at the rifle, then back at her. "I thought you weren't allowed to touch it." Ashley's lips curved into a faint smile. Her gaze never left the horizon. "So did I." The silence between them was thicker than the haze of spent gunpowder. But inside that silence was understanding, unspoken, undeniable. When they descended back to camp, no one stared at her with shock. They looked with something deeper, gratitude. That night, under the silver wash of moonlight, Ashley opened her old medical notebook. The pages still smelled faintly of antiseptic. She didn't write about the Barrett. She didn't write about the men she had dropped on the ridge. She wrote only one line. "Today I used everything I had, every skill, every breath to keep others alive, whether with a needle or a bullet." The news spread through camp within hours of the convoy's safe return from Salton Valley. No lives lost, not a single vehicle destroyed. On its own, that was remarkable. But what set every corner buzzing wasn't the survival. It was the revelation of who had fired the Barrett 50 calorie, turning certain disaster into an unlikely victory. Ashley Marin, the nurse. Disbelief rippled like a shockwave. Some laughed nervously, others shook their heads outright. A medic? Behind the Barrett? No one had expected it. No one had even thought it possible. In the tactical room, Commander Hayden Greaves sat motionless, a SEAL veteran carved by years of battle, still limping from a wound in Fallujah. His scarred hands gripped the table as the playback looped again. The grainy audio captured Vance's voice, sharp with shock. "The shooter is medical." Repeated 3 times. Unmistakable. Greaves's mind dragged him back to weeks earlier, to the moment he'd warned her directly. His words had been stone. "If you touch that Barrett, you're out of the team for good." Now the irony burned in his chest. That same Barrett had saved every man in the convoy, and the one who defied his order was the one who had fired it. The post-mission debrief overflowed. Soldiers pressed into the room, not for protocol, but curiosity. Ashley sat in the back row, as unassuming as ever. Her fatigues were still stained with the red dust of Salton Valley. Her sleeves rolled to the elbows, sun-darkened skin streaked with sweat. Nothing about her posture announced heroism, yet every eye in the room sought her. The first to break the silence was Rico, a seasoned sniper with years of reputation etched into his name. He scratched his jaw, studied her a long moment, then said with a crooked grin, "I thought you were supposed to be patching us up. Didn't realize you were out there staring death down and beating it." The room erupted in laughter. Not mockery, but the laughter of men who had been spared the grave, their relief sharp, their respect unmistakable. Then Vance stood. His voice carried no humor, no hesitation. "If Ashley hadn't fired that first shot, I wouldn't be here right now." The laughter faded into silence, heavier than smoke. Greaves rose next. The room stilled instantly. Every soldier knew the weight of his presence. He walked slowly toward Ashley, pulling something from his pocket, a challenge coin engraved with the symbol of an oak tree. His gravelly voice carried across the hall. "This coin was meant for a formal ceremony, but some people don't need ceremony to be recognized." He placed it on the table before her. The faint clink of metal against wood echoed louder than any medal presentation. No flags, no cameras, no anthem, just a coin and the unspoken truth it carried. Respect, earned in fire. When the meeting broke, something shifted forever. No one called her the nurse anymore. They called her by her name. Simple, direct, irreversible. Days later, during a joint medical tactical drill, Ashley was assigned as an observer with the sniper unit. A fresh recruit, half joking, asked the instructor, "Is she even qualified to be here?" The instructor didn't answer with words. He pointed instead to the new sniper's glove that now hung by the door of the medical bay. Ashley's glove, torn at the finger, dust from Salton Valley still clinging to it. "She's the only one in this room who's pulled the trigger and saved the whole team." The recruit's smile vanished. The next day he appeared at the medical bay, not with an injury, not for treatment, but for advice. Ashley didn't posture, didn't lecture. She sat, listened, and answered simply. She told him about breathing, about stillness, about how the hardest skill wasn't pulling the trigger, it was knowing when not to. And in that moment, the nurse who once blended into the background became something more in their eyes, not just a medic, not just a soldier, but a bridge between life and death, healing and fighting, compassion and courage. Every late week afternoon, when the sun slipped behind the mountains beyond the base, Ashley would swing the medical bay door wide, not for airflow, not for light. She wanted passers-by to see the sniper's glove on the hook, clean, unused, paired with a neat handwritten note. "For next time, hopefully, you won't need it." It wasn't an anonymous trinket. It was the team's quiet confession, the thing none of them could quite bring themselves to say. The woman once written off as least likely had become load-bearing steel. That small symbol, unadorned and silent, stood taller than any citation read into a microphone. Months turned, wounds knit, and yet Salton Valley kept echoing through low, late conversations. When fresh faces rotated in, Ashley's story resurfaced, not as campfire myth, but as a soft admonition. Do not mistake a title for a limit. A month later, at a ceremony honoring military medics, someone put Ashley's name up for contribution beyond rank. She didn't go. That night she opened the old wooden box again. The photograph of her father beneath the oak was still there, alongside the glove with the torn finger from a life ago. This time she set the oak tree challenge coin, Commander Greaves's quiet recognition, beneath the photo and closed the lid with care. Not to trap the past, but to lay it down. If you know you are still doing the next right thing, you don't need to clutch your victories by the throat. The following week, a cluster of junior soldiers proposed a drill that braided sniper coordination with medical response. For the first time anyone could remember, they requested a lead instructor who wasn't a legendary gunner, but Petty Officer Ashley Marin. No one argued. Not because she was a trophy on a wall, but because they believed she could teach the hardest rule of all, what deserves a bullet and what deserves a bandage. At one dusk run, the wind lurched and a young shooter faltered. Ashley stepped in without commentary, lowered to one knee, settled his feet, shifted the rifle a hair's breadth, and smiled a warm edge that loosened his shoulders without letting his focus leak away. The shot broke. Center hit. He turned, flushed, and grateful. Ashley only tipped a nod and murmured half to him, half to the dusk. The wind is never the problem. The problem is who's breathing beside you. Her father's line, born on a dusty range under an old oak, took root that evening. Before long, the team repeated it like a mantra, more compass than slogan. That night, in her spare quarters, Ashley took up her ballistics notebook and flipped to the final page. Her palms still wore faint old calluses. The ghost of cordite was gone. She wrote one simple sentence. "Today, Dad, I don't hear bullets anymore. I hear my teammates breathing steady." Under the amber cone of the lamp, the page seemed to rest. No one witnessed it. Yet in that small, unobserved hour, the harsh emblems of war, the Barrett, the coin, the glove, were gentled by the sound that matters most, breath continuing. Morning brought a new quiet surprise. Beside the original glove on the medical bay door hung another sniper's glove. No note, no owner. The whole base understood anyway. Respect doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it simply appears where others can see it and then gets back to work. By weekend, Ashley still opened the door. The breeze pushed dust along the corridor. Boots ticked past. Conversations thinned to passing nods. The gloves swayed like small banners, one promise of protection, one answer in kind. People didn't slow to stare. They didn't have to. They had already learned the lesson the hard way. The hand that steadies a needle can steady a trigger. The courage to heal and the courage to act are not separate talents, but one spine, one breath. When new recruits asked why the gloves stayed up, the older hands shrugged and grinned. Insurance, one would say. Humility, another added. The truth was both, and more. A living reminder that roles are tools, not cages. That greatness can come wearing a medic's band and still hear the wind like a sniper. That the quietest person in the room might be the one who stands up when it matters and then sits down without taking a bow. So the door kept opening. The glove kept hanging. And the base kept breathing steadier now because one person proved that saving lives isn't a single skill. It's a way of standing in the world, whether your palm closes on a thread of suture or the cool curve of a trigger. And now, dear audience, brace for the next turn in this story. If the ride has your heart racing, hit like and subscribe only if you mean it. Then drop a comment telling me where you're tuning in from and what time it is there. It's a thrill seeing this community stretch across the map.